The transport ship landed with a heavy thud on the metal platform of Thoth, forward operating base Kepler-7. Dust clouds rose around the landing pad as the engines shut down with a loud hiss. Several alien soldiers stopped their work to watch as the boarding ramp slowly lowered. Commander Zex-Hi stepped out into the bright sunlight of the alien world. He was tall, even for a Veltharan. His forearms hung at his sides as he walked down the ramp. His crystalline skin caught the light and threw rainbow colors across the ground. But the pretty colors could not hide the deep scars that covered his body. Long white lines ran across his chest where claws had raked him. Burns marked his left shoulder where plasma fire had nearly taken his arm. His face bore the worst damage. 3 parallel scars ran from his forehead down to his jaw. His right eye was gone, replaced with a mechanical implant that glowed red in the shadows. The soldiers watching him whispered to each other. Some pointed at his scars. Others stared at the many medals pinned to his uniform. Zex-Hi had seen more. War than any of them. That much was clear. "Is that the new tactical advisor?" asked Sergeant Clix. He was a Kithra, one of the insect people. His 6 legs clicked on the metal floor as he moved closer to get a better look. "He looks like he has been through a meat grinder." "Several meat grinders," said Lieutenant Vash. She was tall and thin, her body made of living energy that glowed. Blue inside a containment suit. The Luminari rarely left their energy forms, but war made many things necessary. "Look at those medals. I count at least 12 campaign ribbons." "Bah," said Captain Morik. The big reptilian saurian crossed his arms over his broad chest. "Medals do not make a warrior. Any fool can collect pretty ribbons if he lives long enough." The other soldiers murmured agreement. They were all proud warriors from strong military races. They had fought in many battles across the galaxy. This scarred old Veltharan might have experience, but that did not mean he was better than them. Zex, single quotes, HA, heard their whispers, but said nothing. He had heard it all before. Young soldiers always thought they knew everything about war. They would learn soon enough. He made his way to the command center. The base was large, built into the side of a mountain. Tunnels connected different sections. The main areas were carved right into the rock for protection. It was a good defensive position. Inside the command center, dozens of aliens worked at computer stations. Holographic displays showed troop movements and supply lines. The noise was constant. Voices calling out updates, machines beeping, feet moving across metal floors. General Vyses stood at the center of it all. She was a Zirithi, with purple skin and tentacles instead of hair. Her people were known for their strategic minds. She looked up as Zex-Hi approached. "Commander," she said with a nod. "Welcome to Kepler-7. I trust your journey was acceptable." "It was adequate, General," Zex-Hi replied. His voice was rough, damaged by breathing toxic gases on some long-ago battlefield. "I am ready to begin work." "Excellent. Let me show you the current situation." She gestured to a large holographic map that showed the entire star system. Red dots marked enemy positions. Blue dots showed allied forces. "We have been fighting the hegemony forces for 6 months now. They control 3 planets in this system. We hold 2. Zex-Hi studied the map carefully. His good eye moved from one position to another. His mechanical eye whirred softly as it zoomed in on different areas. "What about the humans?" he asked. "I see no human units marked." The room went quiet. Several officers looked uncomfortable. General Vyses cleared her throat. "The humans are not involved in this operation," she said carefully. "The Council decided their methods were too extreme for this type of campaign." Captain Morik snorted with laughter. "You mean they are too crazy," he said loudly. Those Deathworld savages cannot follow proper military procedure. They fight like wild animals. Lieutenant Vash nodded. I heard they eat their enemies, she said with disgust. And they torture. Prisoners for information. My cousin fought alongside them once, said Sergeant Clicks. He said they never retreat. Even when they should, they just keep fighting until they all die. Exactly, said Captain Morrick. No discipline, no strategy. They come from that forbidden planet and think brute force solves everything. The word forbidden hit Zexhai like a physical blow. His 4 hands clenched into fists. His scarred face went very still. The red light of his mechanical eye grew brighter. Forbidden's planet, he said very quietly. You mean Earth? The room fell silent. All conversation stopped. Even the computer operators turned to look at him. Something in his voice made everyone freeze. General Dizes looked worried. Commander, is there a problem? Zexhai did not answer right away. He stared at the map, but his mind was somewhere else. Somewhere far away and long ago. His breathing became slow and deep. I fought with humans, he said finally. His voice was barely above a whisper. In the Proxima campaign? 3 years of hell across 4 star systems. Captain Morrick laughed again, but it sounded forced now. Then you know what I mean. Crazy Deathworld warriors with no sense. Zexhai turned to look at him. The scarred Velthrin's face showed no emotion, but something in his expression made the big Saurian take a step backward. No sense? Zexhai repeated. He walked slowly toward the tactical display. His footsteps echoed in the silent room. You think they have no sense? He stopped in front of the map and placed one hand on the control panel. The display changed to show a different star system, one with many red markers indicating heavy fighting. This was Proxima 4, he said, a mining world. Nothing special. But the hegemony wanted it, so we had to take it from them. His mechanical eye whirred as he zoomed in on one particular area. The fighting lasted for 8 months. Brutal, close combat in the mining tunnels. The other officers moved closer to see the display better. Despite their earlier words, they were curious to hear a real war story. We were losing, Zexhai continued. The hegemony had better positions, better equipment, more soldiers. Our casualties were mounting every day. He paused and touched one of his scars absently. Then the humans arrived. How many? Asked Lieutenant Vash. 200, Zexhai said. 200 humans against 15,000 hegemony troops. Captain. Morrick scoffed. 200? That is nothing. What could so few soldiers do? Zexhai looked at him again. This time the Saurian did not laugh. They changed everything, the old veteran said simply. In 3 days, they broke a stalemate that had lasted 8 months. He fell silent again, lost in memory. The other soldiers waited, but he seemed to have forgotten they were there. His good eye stared at the tactical display, but he was seeing something else entirely. Commander, General Dizes said gently, perhaps you should rest. The journey here was long. Zexhai blinked and looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time. Yes, he said slowly. Rest would be good, but first ... He looked at each of the officers in turn. You should know something about humans, about what they are really like. We know enough, said Captain Morrick. Savage fighters from a death world. No, said Zexhai firmly. You know nothing at all. With that, he turned and walked toward the door. The other soldiers watched him go in confused silence. At the doorway, he stopped and looked back. Tonight, if you want to hear real war stories, find me in the mess hall, he said. I will tell you about humans, about what they can do, about what I saw on that forbidden planet they call home. Then he was gone, leaving the command center full of puzzled and intrigued alien soldiers. A mess hall was crowded that evening. Word had spread quickly through the base about the new tactical advisor and his strange reaction to hearing about humans. Alien soldiers from every species filled the long metal tables. They ate their meals and talked in low voices, all waiting to see if the scarred Veltheron would really show up. Captain Morik sat with his usual group of Saurian warriors. "This should be amusing," he said, cutting into his protein ration with sharp claws. "I want to hear him try to defend those crazy Death Worlders." Lieutenant Vash floated near the wall in her energy containment suit. "Perhaps he will have some interesting battle stories," she said. "Even if the humans are savage, war stories are always entertaining." Sergeant Clicks clicked his mandibles together nervously. "My cousin said the humans he fought with were ... different. Strange. He would not talk about it much." "Different how?" asked Private Zorn, a young Kithera who had never seen real combat. "He said they did things that made no sense," Clicks replied. "Stupid things, dangerous things, but somehow they worked." The conversation stopped when Zexhai entered the mess hall. The old veteran looked around the room slowly. His mechanical eye glowed red in the dim lighting. He carried a simple meal tray and walked to an empty table near the center of the room. For a few minutes, he ate in silence. The other soldiers watched him, but no one spoke. Finally, Captain Morik stood up and walked over to his table. "Well, Commander?" the big Saurian said. "You promised us stories about humans. Are you going to tell them or not?" Zexhai looked up from his food. "Sit down," he said quietly. "All of you who want to listen. But understand something first. These are not entertaining war stories. They are not tales to make you laugh or feel proud. They are truth. And truth about humans is harder to believe than fiction." The soldiers gathered around his table. Some sat on benches. Others stood behind them. Even the kitchen staff stopped working to listen. "You call them Death World savages?" Zexhai began. "You think they fight without discipline or strategy. You believe they are simple brutes who solve problems with violence." He paused and took a drink from his cup. "You are wrong about everything." Captain Morik crossed his arms. "Then enlighten us, old veteran. Tell us how wonderful these humans really are." Zexhai set down his cup and leaned back. "The Proxima Campaign," he said. "Fourth planet. Mining world covered in toxic clouds and acid rain. The atmosphere would kill most of us in minutes without protection suits. The gravity was twice what we were used to. The temperature changed by 50 degrees every few hours." He touched the scars on his face absently. "We had been fighting in the mining tunnels for months. The hegemony had dug in deep. Every corridor was trapped. Every room was defended. Our casualties were enormous." "What kind of casualties?" asked Lieutenant Vash. 40% losses in the first month," Zexhai replied. 60% by the third month. My regiment started with 2,000 soldiers. By the time the humans arrived, I had 300 left. The listening soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Those were terrible numbers. "The humans landed at night during an acid storm," Zexhai continued. "Most species cannot even move in acid rain. It burns through armor and dissolves equipment. But they just wrapped extra cloth around their gear and kept going." "How many humans?" asked Sergeant Clicks. "2 companies. About 200 soldiers. They were assigned to my sector." Zexhai smiled slightly, but it was not a happy expression. "I thought they would last maybe a week. I was wrong again." He stood up and began to pace slowly as he talked. "The first time I saw them fight was in Tunnel Complex 7, the hegemony. Had it locked down tight. Machine gun nests at every intersection. Plasma mortar covering all the approaches. We had tried to take it 6 times. 6 times we failed. What did the humans do differently? asked Private Zorn. They went through the walls, Zexhai said simply. Mining tunnels have thin barriers between levels. The humans brought shaped charges and blew holes wherever they wanted to go. While we attacked from the front, they came from above, below, and the sides. Captain Morik nodded. Clever tactics. But any good commander could think of that. The tactics were not the impressive part, Zexhai replied. It was what happened when things went wrong. He stopped pacing and looked directly at the Saurian captain. Sergeant Martinez was leading one of the assault teams. Human male, about 30 years old. During the fighting, a plasma mortar round exploded near him. Shrapnel punctured his lung and broke 3 ribs. Then he was done, said Lieutenant Vash. No soldier can fight with a punctured lung. That is what I thought too, Zexhai said. I ordered him to fall back for medical treatment. Do you know what he said to me? The soldiers waited. He said, "Not yet, sir. My boys are still in there." Zexhai's voice became very quiet. Then he sealed the hole in his chest with emergency foam and went back into the tunnel. That is suicide. Captain Morik protested. No one can fight with a collapsed lung. Martinez fought for 3 more hours, Zexhai said. He led his team through 4 more tunnel complexes. He carried 2 wounded soldiers on his back for over a kilometer. He only stopped fighting when we had secured the entire area. The mess hall was completely silent now. Even the kitchen staff had stopped moving. When the medics finally got to him, they said he should have been dead within minutes, Zexhai continued. The foam had barely sealed his chest. He was running on pure willpower and whatever humans have instead of sense. What happened to him? Asked Private Zorn. He spent 3 days in the medical bay. Then he came back and asked for his next assignment. Zexhai sat down again. That was my introduction to human endurance. Lieutenant Vash floated closer. Surely that was unusual. One soldier acting foolishly does not represent an entire species. Zexhai laughed, but it sounded bitter. One soldier? Let me tell you about the rest of them. He gestured to the scars on his shoulder. 2 weeks later, we were attacking a hegemony supply depot. The mission went bad, very bad. My transport got hit by enemy fire and crashed in a crater, filled with acid runoff from the mining operations. Acid runoff? Sergeant Clix clicked his mandibles nervously. Concentrated industrial acid. It would dissolve Kythera chitin in seconds. Burn through saurian hide like paper. Eat a luminary containment suit faster than you could blink. Zexhai touched his shoulder scars again. It was already burning through my armor when I hit the bottom of the crater. How did you survive? Asked Captain Morik. Martinez dove in after me, Zexhai said simply. He jumped into a pool of acid to pull me out. The soldiers stared at him in disbelief. That is impossible, Lieutenant Vash said. No being can survive in concentrated acid. Humans have something they call adrenaline, Zexhai explained. It makes them ignore pain and damage for short periods. Martinez's armor was dissolving as he grabbed me. His skin was burning, but he just gritted his teeth and hauled me up. The crater wall. What about his injuries? Asked Private Zorn. 3rd-degree chemical burns over 30% of his body. The medics said he would be in surgery for weeks. Zexhai paused. He was back on duty in 10 days. Wrapped in bandages and moving carefully, but ready to fight. Captain Morik shook his head. I do not believe it. No species is that resilient. I have the medical records, Zexhai said quietly. I have video recordings. I have witness statements from dozens of soldiers. Believe it or not, that is your choice. But I was there. I saw it happen. He looked around the table at all the listening faces. You want to know what humans are really like? They are the only species I have ever met that considers impossible. Odds a personal challenge. They look at certain death and ask, how can we make this work anyway? The mess hall remained silent for a long moment. Finally, Sergeant Clix spoke up. Are they all like that? He asked. All humans? Zexhai considered the question carefully. Martinez was not special among his people. He was just a sergeant, a common soldier. Every human unit I fought with had dozens like him. He stood up and collected his meal tray. Tomorrow night, if you want to hear more, I will tell you about the time humans taught me what never leave a man behind really means. As he walked toward the exit, Captain Morik called after him. Commander, wait. If humans are so remarkable, why does everyone call Earth the Forbidden Planet? Zexhai stopped at the doorway. He turned back with that same bitter smile. Because, he said, nothing that dangerous should be able to create something so decent. Then, he was gone, leaving the mess hall full of thoughtful and troubled alien soldiers. The next evening, the mess hall was even more crowded than before. Word about Zexhai's stories had spread throughout the entire base. Soldiers who had never shown interest in war tales now sat waiting eagerly. Even some of the officers had come. To listen, Captain Morik arrived early and claimed a seat near the front. Tonight I want details, he announced loudly. Real proof of these impossible human feats. Lieutenant Vash floated nearby, her energy form flickering with curiosity. Perhaps the commander was exaggerating yesterday. Memory can play tricks after many years. Sergeant Clix clicked his mandibles nervously. My cousin contacted me today. He confirmed the stories about human endurance. But he said there were other things. Darker things he still will not discuss. When Zexhai entered the mess hall, the conversation stopped immediately. He looked around at all the waiting faces and shook his head slowly. You are here for entertainment, he said. But what I am going to tell you tonight is not entertaining. It is horror. He sat down at the same table as before. This time he did not eat. He just stared at his hands for a long moment. 2 months into the Proxima campaign, he began quietly. Our supply lines were under constant attack. The hegemony had developed new tactics. They would capture our soldiers and use them as bait to draw in rescue teams. Standard enemy procedure, said Captain Morik. We have protocols for dealing with captured personnel. Yes, Zexhai agreed. We write them off as losses. We do not risk more soldiers trying to save them. It is logical. It is efficient. It saves lives in the long run. He looked up at the listening soldiers. Humans do not think like that. Lieutenant Vash moved closer. What do you mean? The hegemony captured 12 of our soldiers during a patrol, Zexhai continued. 6 Kithra, 4 Saurians, and 2 Veltheron, including myself. Standard doctrine said to abandon us. The tactical computer calculated that a rescue mission had less than 5% chance of success. So the humans followed doctrine and left you? Asked Private Zorn. Zexhai's mechanical eye glowed brighter. The humans do not have a word for acceptable losses when it comes to their own people, or those they consider their own people. He stood up and began pacing again. The hegemony took us to a processing facility. It was a nightmare place built inside an asteroid. They had been experimenting with something called hive mind swarmers. Several soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Everyone had heard whispers about the swarmers. They were one of the hegemony's most terrifying weapons. The swarmers are parasites, Zexhai explained. They implant their eggs inside living hosts. The eggs hatch and eat the host from the inside while keeping them alive. The process takes weeks. The new swarmers carry the memories and knowledge of their hosts. Lieutenant Vash's energy form flickered with disgust. That is biological warfare. It violates every treaty. The hegemony does not care about treaties, Zexhai replied. They had thousands of swarmer eggs ready to implant. We were going to be their first test subjects for mass production. The mess hall was completely silent now. Even the kitchen staff had stopped working to listen. The facility was built into solid rock, Zexai continued. One entrance, heavily fortified, defended by 10,000 hegemony troops and automated defense systems. Any rescue mission would be suicide. But the humans came anyway, said Sergeant Clicks. It was not a question. 6 humans, Zexai said quietly. 6 soldiers against 10,000 enemies and an impregnable fortress. Captain Morik laughed harshly. 6? That is not a rescue mission. That is madness. That is what I thought when I saw them, Zexai agreed. I was chained in a cell deep inside the facility when the alarm started going off. At first, I thought it was a drill. Then the explosions began. He stopped pacing and gripped the back of a chair. His 4 hands were shaking slightly. The first human I saw was Corporal Jackson. Human female, maybe 25 years old. She had blown a hole through 3 levels of reinforced armor plating to reach our cell block. Her armor was cracked. Her weapon was damaged. She was bleeding from multiple wounds. How did 6 soldiers penetrate that kind of defense? Asked Lieutenant Vash. They did not try to fight their way in, Zexai explained. They attached explosives to themselves and pretended to be suicide bombers. The hegemony brought them inside to interrogate them before execution. Private Zorn stared in shock. They allowed themselves to be captured? Deliberately. They planned it that way. Zexai's voice became very quiet. Once inside, they broke free and began working toward the prison levels. But the facility was huge. Thousands of corridors. Tens of thousands of enemies. So they failed, said Captain Morik. No, Zexai replied. They succeeded. But the cost ... double quotes. He trailed off and stared at the wall. What cost? Pressed Lieutenant VASH.ZEX single quotes HAI closed his good eye. Private Williams was the demolitions expert. When they reached the main security center, he discovered that the only way to disable the prison locks was to manually override the system from inside the control room. But the room was filled with poison gas. So they found breathing equipment, said Sergeant Clicks. There was no breathing equipment that would work with human physiology, Zexai said. Williams went in anyway. He held his breath for over 4 minutes while he disabled the locks. When he came out, his lungs were destroyed by the gas. He died choking on his own blood. The listening soldiers looked horrified. But he saved us, Zexai continued. The locks opened. We could escape. Except the facility was crawling with hegemony troops searching for the intruders. How did you get out? Asked Private Zorn. Sergeant Torres and Private Martinez created a diversion, Zexai said. They went to the swarmer breeding chambers and began destroying the egg storage tanks. It drew every enemy soldier in the facility to that location. That left the exit clear, said Captain Morik approvingly. Good tactical thinking. The exit was clear, Zexai agreed. But Torres and Martinez were trapped in the breeding chambers with thousands of angry swarmers and 10,000 hegemony troops. He opened his eye and looked directly at Captain Morik. They knew it was a death trap when they went in. They did. It anyway, because it was the only way to save the rest of us. What happened to them? Asked Lieutenant Vash. Zexai's mechanical eye dimmed. The swarmers got them first. I heard their screams over the radio as the parasites began eating them. But they kept fighting. Even while being consumed, they kept destroying egg tanks and calling out enemy positions to help the rest of us escape. The mess hall was so quiet that the hum of the air recycling system sounded loud. Corporal Jackson, Private Chun, and Specialist. Rodriguez got us out of the facility, Zexai continued. But Rodriguez had been shot in the spine during the escape. She could not walk, so the others carried her, said Sergeant Clicks. for 50 kilometers across hostile terrain, while being hunted by enemy patrols. Rodriguez kept telling them to leave her behind. She said she was slowing them down. Zexhai smiled bitterly. Jackson told her to shut up, said no one gets left behind. Ever. Did they all make it back? Asked Private Zorn. Jackson and Shun did. They carried Rodriguez and the rest of us all the way to the extraction point. Rodriguez died 2 hours before the rescue ships arrived. Internal bleeding from her spinal injury. Zexhai sat down heavily. Before she died, she made Jackson promise to write letters to the families of Williams, Torres, and Martinez. She wanted them to know that their sons and daughters died as heroes. Captain Mark was quiet for a long moment. Finally he spoke. That is ... impressive loyalty. But surely this was an elite unit. Special forces. Regular infantry, Zexhai replied. Common soldiers. No special training. No enhanced equipment. Just humans doing what humans do. What do you mean, what humans do? Asked Lieutenant Vash. Zexhai looked around the table at all the alien faces. You have tribal bonds, he said to Sergeant Clix. Strong ones. But you abandon wounded who slow down the group. Clix looked uncomfortable but nodded. You have honor codes, he said to Captain Morik. Ancient traditions of warrior brotherhood. But you do not risk the many for the few. Morik's expression darkened, but he said nothing. You have collective consciousness, he said to Lieutenant Vash. Perfect unity of purpose. But you calculate. Acceptable losses. Vash's energy form flickered uncertainly. Humans are different, Zexhai continued. They form bonds that transcend logic. They will die for strangers. They will sacrifice themselves for enemies if those enemies are under their protection. They adopt orphans from species that have been trying to kill them. He stood up slowly. 6 humans died to save 12 aliens they barely knew. Not because of orders. Not because of treaties. Not because of strategic value. Because they had decided we were part of their pack. Pack? Asked Private Zorn. Family, Zexhai explained. Humans extend their family bonds to anyone they fight beside. Once you are family, they will move heaven, earth to protect you. They will die before they abandon you. He looked around the room one more time. Tomorrow night, I will tell you about their home world. About the planet that created creatures capable of such loyalty. About why the galaxy calls Earth the Forbiddens. Planet. As he walked toward the exit, Captain Morik called after him. Commander, wait. If humans form such strong bonds, how do they ever make peace with their enemies? The third night brought even more soldiers to the mess hall. News of Zexhai's stories had reached every corner of the base. Officers sat beside enlisted soldiers. Scientists from the research labs came to listen. Even General Vyses arrived and found a seat near the back. The atmosphere was different tonight. Gone were the jokes and casual conversations. The alien soldiers sat quietly, their faces serious. They had begun to understand that these were not just war stories. They were lessons about a species they had completely misunderstood. Captain. Morik sat in his usual spot, but he no longer looked skeptical. The big Saurian warrior had been quiet all day. Several soldiers had seen him in the communications center, requesting files about human military units. Lieutenant Vash floated near the wall, her energy form dimmed with thought. She had spent hours reading medical reports about human physiology. The numbers made no sense. No species should be able to survive the injuries she had read about. When Zexhai entered the mess hall, every conversation stopped. The old veteran looked around at all the waiting faces and nodded slowly. I see the word has spread, he said. Tonight you want to know about Earth itself, about the world that created such creatures. He sat down and was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, His voice was barely above a whisper. "I went to Earth once," he said, "after the war ended. I was invited to attend a memorial service for the humans who died saving us. I thought I understood what humans were like. I thought 3 years of fighting beside them had taught me everything." He looked up at the listening soldiers. I was wrong. Again. General Vyses leaned forward in her seat. What was Earth like? "Commander?" Zexhi's mechanical eye whirred as it focused on something far away. "Hell," he said simply. "A beautiful, terrible hell that should not be able to support life." "Explain," said Captain Morik. "The ship that took me there required full environmental protection just to enter Earth's atmosphere," Zexhi began. "The radiation levels from their sun would give most species cancer within days. The oxygen concentration is so high it would poison a luminari. The gravity is crushing." Lieutenant Vash flickered nervously. "How crushing?" "Earth gravity is twice what we consider normal. I had to wear a support exoskeleton just to walk upright. My bones ached constantly. My heart strained to pump blood against the pull." He touched his chest absently. "Humans live in that crushing weight every day from the moment they are born." Sergeant Clix clicked his mandibles. "That would explain their physical strength." "Physical strength is only the beginning," Zexhi replied. "The weather on Earth is insane. Temperatures that change by 40 degrees in a single day. Storms that throw ice stones as big as your fist. Winds that can knock down buildings." "Surely they stay inside during dangerous weather," said Private Zorn. Zexhi laughed, but it sounded bitter. "I was there during something they call winter. The temperature dropped below the freezing point of water and stayed there for months. Ice covered everything. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe. Even with my environmental suit." He stood up and began pacing. "Do you know what humans do during winter? They go outside for fun. They slide down hills on pieces of metal. They throw ice balls at each other. Their children build sculptures out of frozen water." The listening soldiers stared at him in disbelief. "I watched human children playing in weather that would kill a Kithera in minutes," Zexhi continued. "They wore thin cloth coverings and acted like it was perfectly normal." "What about the dangerous animals?" asked Lieutenant Vash. "Death worlds are known for predators." Zexhi stopped pacing and looked directly at her. "Earth has predators that hunt in coordinated packs. Creatures with claws longer than my fingers and teeth, designed for ripping flesh. Massive beasts that weigh more than a transport vehicle." "How do humans defend against them?" asked Captain Morik. "They turned them into pets," Zexhi said flatly. The mess hall erupted in confused murmurs. Several soldiers laughed, thinking it was a joke. "I am serious," Zexhi said loudly. "Humans domesticated the pack hunters. They live in human homes and play with human children. I saw a creature that could tear my arm off, licking the face of a human infant." "That is impossible," said Sergeant Clix. "No predator can be completely domesticated. These predators have been living with humans for thousands of years," Zexhi replied. "Humans bred them to be loyal companions. They feed them, care for them, and love them like family members." He sat down again and leaned forward. "But that is not the strangest part. The strangest part is what humans call wildlife." "Wildlife?" asked Private Zorn. "Animals that humans have not domesticated. They live freely on Earth, sharing the planet with humans." Zexhi's good eye widened. "There are millions of species. Creatures that swim in water filled with acid. Things that fly through the poisonous atmosphere. Beasts that hibernate in the killing cold. Surely humans avoid these dangerous areas," said General Vyses. "Humans go camping in them," Zexhi said. "For recreation. They pack food and supplies and go live in the wilderness for fun. They call it getting back to nature. Lieutenant Vash's energy form flickered rapidly. You mean they voluntarily exposed themselves to mortal danger? I went on one of these camping trips, Zexhai said quietly. Martinez's family invited me to something they called a barbecue picnic in a place called Yellowstone. What happened? Asked Captain Morick. I wore full environmental armor. Climate control, radiation shielding, atmosphere processors. The works. Zexhai touched his scars. Martinez's 5-year-old daughter wore shorts and a thin shirt. The soldiers exchanged glances of disbelief. The little girl showed me something. Called a geyser, Zexhai continued. Superheated water shooting hundreds of feet into the air. Hot enough to cook flesh instantly. She stood right next to it, eating something called ice cream. Ice cream? Asked Sergeant Clicks. Frozen milk. Mixed with sugar. Humans eat it when the weather is hot. Zexhai shook his head, while standing next to boiling water that could kill them instantly. He looked around the room at all the stunned faces. That night, we slept in thin fabric shelters. No environmental protection, no safety barriers. Just cloth between us and a wilderness filled with predators, poison plants, and deadly weather. Were you attacked? Asked Private Zorn. We were visited by a massive creature called a bear. It weighed more than 3 saurians and had claws like sword blades. Zexhai smiled slightly. Martinez's daughter fed it leftover food and took pictures with it. Captain Morick stood up abruptly. This is madness. No species could survive on such a world. Humans do not just survive on Earth, Zexhai replied. They thrive. They love their death world. They write poetry about its beauty. They risk their lives to protect its dangerous wildlife. Why? Asked Lieutenant Vash. Why would they love a place that tries to kill them? Zexhai was quiet for a long moment. Because Earth made them what they are. Every challenge, every danger, every threat that should have destroyed them instead made them stronger. He stood up and walked to the center of the room. Humans learn to endure pain because Earth teaches them that pain is temporary. They learn to work together because Earth will kill anyone who tries to survive alone. They learn to adapt because Earth is always changing. What about their loyalty? Asked Sergeant Clicks. Their willingness to die for others? Earth is so dangerous that humans learned early that the group survives when individuals sacrifice for others. Zexhai explained. A human who abandons his tribe will die alone in the wilderness. So they evolved bonds stronger than logic. General Vizes spoke from the back of the room. If Earth is so dangerous, how do humans have time to develop technology and civilization? Zexhai's mechanical eye glowed brighter. Because they refuse to give up. Ever. When earthquakes destroy their cities, they rebuild them. When diseases kill millions, they invent medicine. When their own star threatens them with radiation, they develop technology to protect themselves. But why do they leave such a dangerous world? Asked Private Zorn. Why come to space where it is safer? Because Earth taught them that there is always a bigger challenge, Zexhai said. Always something new to overcome. They came to space not to escape Earth, but to find new worlds to make livable. He looked around the room one more time. Humans terraform planets for other species. They build stations in hostile space. They dive into black holes to rescue stranded ships. They do impossible things because Earth taught them that impossible is just another word for difficult. Captain Morick sat down heavily. If they are so capable, why do we call Earth the Forbidden Planet? Zexhai walked toward the exit. At the doorway, he stopped and turned back. Because any world that can create beings capable of such courage, such loyalty, such stubborn determination to survive and help others, that world must be so dangerous that just visiting it would kill most of us. He paused. And because we are afraid, that if we spent too much time there, we might understand what we could become. What do you mean? Asked Lieutenant Vash. Zexhi's scarred face showed something that might have been regret. Earth does not just create warriors. It creates beings who see a universe full of suffering and decide to fix it. Beings who look at impossible odds and say, "Watch me." He looked directly at General Vyses. "Tomorrow night, I will tell you thee." The fourth night brought the largest crowd yet to the mess hall. Word had spread beyond the base. Soldiers from nearby outposts had requested permission to attend. The room was packed wall to wall with aliens from dozens of species, all waiting to hear the final story from the scarred Veltheron veteran. General Vyses had reserved seats for the senior staff near the front. Captain Morik sat quietly, his usual arrogance replaced by thoughtful concern. Lieutenant Vash's energy form glowed dimly as she processed everything she had learned about humans over the past few days. Sergeant Klix had brought data pads filled with reports he had requested about human colonies and trade agreements. The numbers painted a picture that contradicted everything the galaxy believed about the Death World Warriors. When Zexhi entered the mess hall, the entire room fell silent. The old veteran looked tired tonight. The telling of these stories had clearly taken a toll on him, but his mechanical eyes still glowed with determination. "Tonight is the last story," he said as he sat down. "The most important one, because it is about what humans do when the fighting stops." He looked around at all the waiting faces. "You have heard about human warriors. Tonight you will learn about human hearts." Captain Morik leaned forward. "Hearts, their capacity for forgiveness," Zexhi explained. "Their ability to love former enemies. Their need to heal what war has broken." He was quiet for a moment, organizing his thoughts. The Proxima campaign ended when the hegemony leadership surrendered. 3 years of brutal fighting, millions dead on both sides. Entire worlds burned, cities destroyed. Standard war reparations would follow, said General Vyses. Occupation forces, resource extraction, punishment of war criminals. "That is what I expected too," Zexhi agreed. "That is what every species does after victory. The winners take what they want, and the losers suffer." Lieutenant Vash flickered with curiosity. What did the humans do instead? Zexhi's good eye focused on something far away. 3 days after the surrender, I was in the command center when reports started coming in from occupied hegemony worlds. At first, I thought there had been some mistake. "What kind of reports?" asked Sergeant Klix. "Human medics were treating wounded hegemony soldiers in the same hospitals as their own wounded. Human engineers were rebuilding destroyed hegemony infrastructure. Human teachers were setting up schools for hegemony children." The listening soldiers murmured in confusion. "I went to Admiral Chun, the human fleet commander, and asked if there had been some miscommunication," Zexhi continued. "She looked at me like I was insane and said, 'Of course, we are helping them.'" "The war is over." "But they were enemies," protested Private Zorn. "Enemies who had killed thousands of humans." "That is exactly what I said to Admiral Chun," Zexhi replied. "Do you know what she told me?" The soldiers waited. "She said, 'The people who killed our soldiers are mostly dead now. These are just people trying to rebuild their lives. Why would we punish them for what their leaders did?'" Captain Morik shook his head. "That makes no strategic sense. Defeated enemies should be kept weak to prevent future wars." "I thought the same thing," Zexhi said. "So I asked Admiral Chun about future security. How could humans trust former enemies not to attack again?" "What did she say?" asked Lieutenant Vash. "She said, 'We are going to make it so they do not want to attack us.' Then she showed me the reconstruction plans." Zexhi stood up and began pacing. Humans were not just rebuilding hegemony worlds. They were improving them. Better hospitals than the hegemony had ever built. Schools with the latest human educational technology. Infrastructure designed to last for centuries. That is generous, said General Vyses carefully. Generous? Zexhai laughed, but it was not bitter this time. It was revolutionary. I asked Martinez why humans were spending their own resources to help people who had been trying to kill them just days before. He stopped pacing and looked directly at Captain Morik. Martinez said, because they are people, and people deserve a chance to live good lives. The mess hall was completely silent. But that was not the most shocking part, Zexhai continued. 2 weeks after the surrender, I received an invitation to attend a memorial service on Earth. Not just for human, war dead, but for all the soldiers who had died in the campaign. All soldiers? Asked Sergeant Clix. Human, Kithra, Sorion, Beltheran, Lumina RI ... and Hegemony. Zexhai's voice became very quiet. Humans built a memorial wall with the names of every soldier who died in the Proxima campaign. Enemy names, carved right next to the names of human heroes. Lieutenant Vash's energy form flickered rapidly. They honored their enemies. Admiral Chun gave a speech at the memorial service, Zexhai said. She talked about how all the dead soldiers were someone's children, someone's parents, someone's beloved family members. She said that death in war was tragic, no matter what uniform the soldier wore. What did the hegemony survivors think of this? Asked General Vyses. Zexhai smiled, and this time it was genuine. At first, they were suspicious. They thought it was some kind of psychological warfare. They could not understand why humans would honor fallen enemies. Did they change their minds? Asked Private Zorn. I met a former hegemony colonel at the memorial service, Zexhai replied. His son had died fighting against humans on Proxima 7. He came to Earth, expecting to see his boy's name carved in shame or hidden away. The veteran paused and touched the scars on his face. Instead, he found his son's name engraved in gold, letters right next to the name of the human soldier who had killed him. Both listed as brave warriors who died serving their people. What did the colonel do? Asked Captain Morik. He broke down and cried, Zexhai said simply. Then a human woman came and put her arm around him. She was the mother of the human soldier. She told him that she was sorry for his loss and that both their boys were heroes. The mess hall remained silent for a long moment. 6 months later, that same colonel was working with human engineers to rebuild hegemony factories. Zexhai continued, not as forced labor, as a paid consultant, because humans wanted former enemies to have meaningful work and dignity. But surely some hegemony soldiers harbored resentment, said Lieutenant Vash. Wanted revenge. Some did, Zexhai agreed. There were terrorist attacks, sabotage attempts, assassination plots against human administrators. How did humans respond? Asked Sergeant Clix. They arrested the criminals and put them on trial. Fair trials with defense lawyers and evidence requirements. Then they sent social workers to figure out why those individuals had turned to violence. Captain Morik stared at him. Social workers? Humans discovered that most of the terrorists were acting out of desperation, Zexhai explained. Their families were hungry. Their communities had no hope for the future. Their children had no schools or opportunities. So humans fixed those problems, said General Vyses. It was not a question. Within 2 years, hegemony worlds had better living standards than they had ever known, Zexhai confirmed. Terrorist recruitment dropped to almost zero. Not because humans crushed resistance with force, but because they eliminated the reasons for resistance. He walked to the center of the room and looked around at all the listening faces. Do you understand what this means? Humans won a war not by destroying their enemies, but by turning them into friends. That is impossible, said Captain Morik. But his voice lacked conviction. I was there, HFY said firmly. I saw it happen. Former hegemony soldiers volunteering to serve in human medical units. Ex-enemies sending their children to human universities. Worlds that had been burning with hatred becoming peaceful trading partners. How long did this transformation take? Asked Lieutenant Vash. 5 years, HFY replied. 5 years to turn the most bitter enemies into loyal allies. And it has. Lasted. 30 years later, former hegemony worlds are among humanity's strongest supporters. He sat down again and leaned forward. But that is still not the most important part of the story. What could be more important than that? Asked Private Zorn. HFY's mechanical eye glowed brighter. During the reconstruction, humans discovered that hegemony scientists had been developing biological weapons under threat of execution. Brilliant researchers forced to create horrors against their will. What did humans do with these scientists? Asked General Lyzes. Offered them jobs, HFY said simply. Research positions working on medicine instead of weapons. The same knowledge that could create diseases could also cure them. And they accepted? Asked Sergeant Klix. Dr. Vorthik, the lead hegemony biologist, became the co-developer of the regenerative medicine that saved my eye, HFY said, pointing to his mechanical implant. He spent the rest of his career working with human doctors to cure genetic diseases. The veteran stood up one. Final time. That is who humans really are. Warriors who fight with unbreakable determination. Healers who mend what war has broken. Protectors who adopt former enemies as family. Why are you telling us all this? Asked Captain Morik quietly. HFY looked toward the window that showed the human section of the base. Because tomorrow, you will receive new orders. Human military advisors are being assigned to this operation. And I want you to understand what that means. What does it mean? Asked Lieutenant Vash.